Okay, with the just a quick recap then for trigonometry. A lot of people had a nightmare with this at school, but it's actually not too bad. First thing to remember is notation. So in this triangle here, that's a right angle. We have to name the three sides of the triangle, and it's all dependent on where the angle is that we know, because you'll always know one angle and one side length, and from that you can calculate the others. So you'll either know this angle or I mean, this one's always 90 degrees, that's a right angle. This method only works with 90 degree right angle triangles. There are other techniques, more advanced techniques for non-right angle triangles, but for the time being, let's stick with this. So you could know that angle, or of course, you could know that one. For the time being, we'll say we know this angle. So we'll notate the sides accordingly. Now this side length opposite to that angle is predictably called the opposite. The longest side length, which is opposite to the 90 degree sign, the right angle, the longest length. We can't use L for longest, because L usually means length, so we're using a different letter, which means hypotenuse. So if you've not come across that word before, hypotenuse is the longest length in the triangle, and it's usually just called H. So I've got OH, and then the side length that's next to the angle, a fancy word for next to is adjacent. So we know adjacent, opposite, and hypotenuse. Now the only way that could differ, genuinely, this is as bad as it could be, if you weren't given that angle, let's say you're given this angle instead. We don't know what that angle is yet, but let's say 60 degrees or whatever, it doesn't matter. But if this is the angle known, then in this case, that's the opposite. The longest side is the hypotenuse. That can't change, it's always the longest. And then the side next to the angle is adjacent. So if you imagine this is an eye looking, I'll draw a head on. That eye there is looking, it's always looking at the opposite. So the angle you're given, that's the opposite. That's as bad as it could be. So in this triangle here, if you're given that angle, that's the opposite, that's the hypotenuse, that's the adjacent. And it doesn't matter if the triangle is a strange orientation. If that's 90 degrees and that's the angle, then that's the opposite, that's the adjacent, and that's the longest, the hypotenuse. So however the triangle's rotated, the orientation of the triangle doesn't matter. You're still going to label it up opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, depending on the known angle. So stumbling block number 1 is notate the sides correctly. Alright, so if you can do that, which I'm sure you'll be comfortable with, let's move on to number 2, because the calculator does everything else for you. Let's do a worked example then. We'll call this example 1. So we know this triangle here, and that angle is 30 degrees, and this side length is 15 meters. First thing we're going to have to do is notate it, because there's a couple of rules I'm going to show you in a sec. So this is opposite, because that's the side, the angle that we know. This is adjacent, because it's next to it. And then, of course, the longest side is going to be hypotenuse. Now, there are 3 trigonometry rules that relate the sides together. There's a rule that relates adjacent and hypotenuse. There's a rule that relates opposite and hypotenuse. And there's a rule that relates opposite and adjacent. Now, these 3 rules, first one's called sine. On your calculator, you'll have seen it before, but it's actually abbreviated to sin, but it means sine. So for this case, I suppose we'll keep it as it is on your calculator. So we've got sine, and that relates opposite and hypotenuse. You've got cosine, cos on your calculator, which relates adjacent and hypotenuse. And then tangent, or tan on your calculator, which relates opposite and adjacent. Now, there are plenty of ways to remember these. Usually, sine relates opposite and hypotenuse, so the letters are SOH. Cos relates adjacent and hypotenuse, so it's CAH, Cah. And tan relates opposite and adjacent, Toa, Soh Cah Toa. Many people remember it as Soh Cah Toa. There are rhymes and that you can remember. 6 old horses, clumsy and heavy, trod on Albert. However you want to remember it, there'll be probably quite a lot more on the internet. So Soh Cah Toa. So to solve this triangle, they're the rules that we're familiar with now. We're just going to apply them to this triangle and solve the length O and then the length H. So I always do this. These are the abbreviations, if you like. I've been doing this for years and I still do this. So to solve this, we'll find O first. So write Sohcahtoa. Now what we're going to do is we need to identify the side that we know, which is A, and the side that we want to know, which is O. We could have done this first, but we've just decided to do O first instead. So we'll stick with A and O. So this Soh has got an O in it, Cah has got an A in it, and Toa has got an O and an A in it. So that's the one we use. The other two are redundant. They'll be used later on, but for the purposes of moving forward, we're going to use Toa, which is tangent. So the rule says tan equals O over A. So tan of 30 degrees, that's the angle, equals opposite divided by adjacent. We're going to rearrange this then to get the opposite on its own. So stumbling block number 2, selecting the wrong formula. That's the selecting the one of those. We know we know to choose tan, but you could have chosen sine or cos by mistake, in which case you've fallen for stumbling block number 2, selecting the wrong one. And then we're going to come on to stumbling block 3, is rearranging the formula incorrectly. Now, we know then, we know that A is 15. So in here we could say tan of 30 degrees equals opposite, which we don't know. That's the whole point of doing this. There has to be an unknown in the equation, or you haven't got anything to solve. So we've got opposite, which we don't know, divided by, and we know that A is 15 metres, divided by 15 metres. We're going to rearrange this now to get O on its own. So O divided by 15 equals tan of 30. We don't want to know O divided by 15, we want to know O on its own. So we're going to divide 15 across to the other side of the equal sign, if you like, and it becomes times. Because divide becomes times, plus becomes minus, and square becomes square root. It's a bit like saying something plus 4 equals 10. Well, to work that out, you'd do something equals 10 minus 4. You just take that across. So plus 4 taken across has become minus 4. So we know in this case it's solvable, it'd be 6. Something equals 6. In this case, we've got opposite divided by 15. We don't want to know opposite divided by 15, we want to know opposite on its own. So if we take divide 15 across, it becomes times. So we're going to have tan of 30, that's already there, times 15 equals opposite. This is where we have to move on to a calculator. You're going to need a calculator to work out trigonometry. I should have one installed. Let's just check. Accessories, calculator, great. Yep. So in this case, I'm going to do the tan of 30. So I'll type tan 30. I'll press enter. And then I'm going to times that by 15. Gives me 8.660 meters. So in our case, that's to 3 decimal places. So 0, the opposite I should say, equals 8.660 meters. I'm just going to check that result. Yep, 8.660 rounded to 3 dp. That's great. So on here, 8.660 meters. That's the distance of the opposite. On your calculator, you'll type it in similar to how I've shown it on here. So work out the tan of the angle first, press equals, then times it by 15. That's the safest bet. All we're going to work out now is the hypotenuse, h. I'll do that over here. Let's choose a similar colour. So for h, as always, Soh Cah Toa. Remember, we want to avoid stumbling block number 2. So we know we're given A. We've also worked out O, but we're not going to use O in this, because if we work that out wrong, then we're going to make H definitely wrong. So always use what you're given. So we're given A and we're after H this time. So that's got a H in it, that's got an A and a H in it, and that's got an A in it. So it's clearly that's the one with 2 ticks. The other two are redundant. We're going to use cos this time. Now we know cos is A over H, and we know this because A comes before H when we wrote it down in this little abbreviation. So the cos of the angle, which was 30 degrees, equals A divided by H, because the A comes before the H in Cah. In this case, transposition of formula, when the item you want to know is on the bottom here, there's a cheat you can do. You can only do it really when it's on the bottom. In this case, when we're working out the O, that was on the top, so we took that across. In this case, we just flip those two terms, and you end up with H equals A divided by cos of 30. That's a bit of a trick, really. You could do it long-handed and rearrange it, and you'd still get the same answer. So in our case, you're going to have H equals 15 divided by cos of 30 degrees. So we need a calculator for this in order to work out H. So it's going to be 15 divided by cos of 30 degrees. Make sure your calculator's in degrees. Equals 17.321 meters. We know it's in meters because the question was given in meters. So we've just worked out that H is 17.321 meters. Now that makes sense because H is the longest side and 17.321 is longer than 15. So we've cracked it. Now you can use, and you should use, mobile phone applications, DraftSite, AutoCAD, a graphical drawing application, or websites that work out trigonometry. You should use them to check your answer. You still show your working and all that kind of stuff and do it manually, but always check your answers. We're going to do a quick one on our own now. So this will be not exercise, we'll call it example 2. For this one, let's say it's this way around. That length's 25. I'll do this quicker. That angle's 60 degrees. We need to work out the missing 2 lengths. So we know that bottom one's 25. So first thing to do, we're going to label it up. That's the known angle. That's the opposite. That's the longest side, hypotenuse. That's the adjacent. We'll work out A first. We'll go for adjacent first. So Soh Cah Toa. So we're given the O, and we want to know the A. So that's got O, that's got A, that's got O and A. So it's tan. So tan of 60 degrees equals an O divided by A. O divided by A. The term we want to know, O's 25, we know that. We're going to, because it's on the bottom, we're going to switch them, leaving us A equals opposite divided by tan of 60. So putting our numbers in for O, A equals 25 meters divided by tan of 60. A equals, and we're going to need a calculator for this. 25, oops, made a mess of that. Let's clear that. Where's the clear button? I can't see it for looking. There you are. 25 divided by tan 60 equals 14.434 metres. So A equals 14.434 metres. Fair enough. Let's work out H. And we'll give H another colour. We'll say it's this paler blue. So Soh Cah Toa. Oops. Well, we want to know H, and we're given O. We've just worked out A, but we're not going to use it in case it's wrong. So that's H, that's H, that's O, that's O. That one, we're using O and H, remember, so that's got O and H in it. So we're not using cos or tan, we're using sine. So the sine of 60 equals, and it says O then H, so it's O over H. Again, the term we want to know is on the bottom, so we'll just switch that. So we're going to end up with H equals O divided by sine of 60. H equals 25 metres divided by sine of 60. Notice this time it's sine of 60, and whereas before it was tan. Right, that's where the difference is coming in. So onto our calculator. 25 divided by, this time it's sine of 60, equals 28.868. I'm rounding it to 3dp. So 28.868 metres. Let's let me undo that. So we've worked out H, 28.868 metres. Ask yourself, does that sound sensible? Yes, it does, because H is the longest side and it's longer than 25, so that makes sense. That's pretty much it. So you've got to label your sides correctly first. Let me just red pen this. So you've got to label your sides correctly first. If you get that wrong, you've had it. You've then got to choose the correct trig rule, and then you've got to rearrange your formula correctly. So there are 3 steps. Let's just quickly recap on them. Yep, so notate it correctly. Opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Select the select the right trig formula, and then rearrange the formula correctly. I'll give you one example exercise to do. So when I've written this pause video, we'll call this exercise 1. Let's say that angle's 40 degrees and that's 17 meters. There you go. Now what I'm going to show you next, so pause video and do that one. I'm going to show you how to work out what the angle would have been if you know 2 side lengths. So in this case, let's say that's 15 meters, that's 11 meters, and we want to know what that angle is there. Alright, Sohcahtoa. Well, in this case, labelling it up, that's opposite, that's adjacent, that's hypotenuse. So we've got opposite, adjacent, opposite and adjacent. We're given the opposite and the adjacent, so we want the one with opposite and adjacent in. So the tan of the angle equals opposite divided by adjacent, because it's O then A. So the tan of something is, the opposite is 11 divided by 15. Right, back to our calculator. 11 divided by 15. Right, you'll get a decimal number doing that, which is fine, that's all well and good. We're going to do, on your calculator, you'd do shift tan of that answer, or inverse tan that answer, or second function tan of that answer. On this calculator, I'm moving my cursor to the front, because when you do a reverse tan or a shift tan, you get what's called tan to the minus 1. So I'm going to do tan to the minus 1. Your calculator will do it a lot easier than this, don't worry. Tan to the minus 1, I'll press equals 36.254 degrees. So that angle is 36.254 degrees to 3 decimal places. On your calculator, yeah, do 11 divided by 15 equals, and then just do shift tan, and then press A and S, answer, equals. let me try that again. 11 divided by 15. I mispressed that. Shift tan, not tan. Of the answer equals 36.254. Yeah, I just pressed tan then. I didn't press shift tan. I thought I had. Yeah, so that's how you reverse it. Hope that helps. Just watch this video again if it's a problem.